there's what I have also in the presentation is some pretty good quotes. The only one that I have memorized is actually from Henry Ford, and it goes along the lines of it's good enough that the people of America do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning.
Right.
And
right.
That's a very powerful quote, but when you start looking at it, that's really the truth. So we actually had this fractional reserve banking up until, this is a part that maybe some of your listeners actually do not know, and that's actually in part 2, which is a bit more technical, pretty much because it's hard to explain it because you have to go a little bit into more detail into the Fed balance sheet and that type of thing. But in part 2, I call it Yes, Virginia, there are no reserve requirements. And basically what I prove in that article is that we've completely forgotten about this reserves, and what we're really down to at this point in time is just the paper ticket system. And people can take a look at the proof there. It's all sourced to the Federal Reserve and the FDIC and maybe also the Treasury. I forget all the sources. But all the information is there, and it teaches people about how the banking system basically puts in place an accounting trick to get around this reserve requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So and you can also see from the Fed's own data that we were pretty much running at less than 1% reserves in the system up until October of last year, which we did have this banker bailout. Following the banker bailout, and most likely related to it, but we'd have to actually audit the Fed through Ron Paul's H.R. 1207 and Senate Bill 604 to actually find out. But from that period of time, they pumped in about $800 billion. And what we see is the monetary base of the country went up $800 billion, and so did the bank reserves. So most likely that was just all, paper tickets printed up to cover over the collapse of the banking system. And
that's really printing money out of thin air.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's going on right now is even more serious. There was a Treasury auction in 1 week in July that sold $235 billion in Treasuries. And that's almost $250 billion. And to put things in some type of perspective, in 2008, under George Bush, we had the world's largest federal deficit of roughly $440 billion. And under Obama, we were going up to, I think it's 1.8 trillion dollars. These are just astronomical figures. But what ends up happening is, that Treasury debt funds our national debt, and our Fed has actually been buying the same Treasuries. So that doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense. Like, why would the Treasury sell a Treasury note, say, for $1 million and have the Fed buy it right back? But when you understand how the Fed works, it all becomes very apparent, because when they sell these Treasury bonds, they're called POMOs, P-O-M-O, Permanent Open Market Operations. If they buy back $1 million from the Treasury, they're actually pumping another $9 to $10 million into the system, into the banking system, to keep it aloft. Wow. And this isn't really. To some degree, it is actually helping out, which means that basically the dollar isn't collapsing, but
a temporary help.
Yeah, it's a temporary save. So what I try to tell people, and what I've written a lot of articles on, is also to take a look for yourself. I'm not a financial advisor, at gold and silver, because like I just mentioned, both those metals have actually maintained purchasing power, and that's what it comes down to. It doesn't come down to how many dollars you have at the end of the day. It comes down to your purchasing power and what you're able to actually, purchase with it.
Well, I am a financial advisor, and I have been for 35 years, and I train financial advisors all over the country who do about somewhere around $200 million a year in sales of financial service products in my company. And I am telling people the same thing, Jake, and that is to have at least 20 to 30% of their wealth in gold and silver at this time. And I know that sounds high, but I feel that is really the only way you can protect yourself against inflation other than owning commodities and things like that. But actually owning the gold and silver, the physical gold and silver, and having it in a safe or buried or wherever you choose to keep it, I think at this point in time with what's happening is a very, very sound investment advice to give to anyone. So that I do it myself, and that's what I recommend to people to do at this point in time. I use Tulving myself, Tulving.com, Tulving. They seem to have the best prices over spot, and a very sound dealer and been in business for a long time, a lot of integrity. That's who everyone in my family uses. So anyway, on that note, but this thing is it's interesting, Jake, because I've been reading the biography on Andrew Jackson that is out in the bookstores right now. It's a pretty big seller book. You can see it at any of the bookstores right now. It's a fascinating story about Andrew Jackson, but what's really fascinating to me is it's much more illuminating on his battle with the bank, with the central bank. And Jackson was the last president to actually go head to head with a bank and win a victory. The only reason he won that victory, what he was able to do was veto the rechartering of the bank. That was step one. And then the next thing that he did was to take their funds out of their bank and put it with state banks. And that was an even bigger fight than the rechartering. And at that point, he had done a lot of educating of the public at that time. The people were actually very knowledgeable about the evils of the central bank. However, the central bank was also very powerful because they were able to use their wealth and their power and their money to buy off senators and congressmen and other wealthy people and corporate leaders and business leaders around the country. So it was exactly what we're facing today, only it was more known. People were more knowledgeable and more educated about the evils of the central bank. Even so, it was a huge battle that Jackson won, and he would have never won it. It's very clear from reading this book, Jake, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's very clear that he would have never won that battle unless he had had immense popularity with the people.
Absolutely.
Because there were so many congressmen and senators against him because they were being paid off by the bankers.
Yeah, that presidential campaign ended up being completely focused on the central bank issue.
Absolutely. It was totally about that. And finally, what happened was, Jackson had been educating people and telling people, and his newspapers that were favorable to him were educating people about how evil the bank was and how manipulative they were of the economy. And Biddle, who was the head of the central bank at that time, fell right into Jackson's hands, because what he did is he publicly announced that he was going to tighten credit and destroy the economy, and he did. And he did.